Funny story. There were actually older printers where, when they started networking, you could easily pretty much get into them and hack them. In fact, the one on my floor in the office for a while, I had logged into it and changed it to where it said insert coin was the default thing. And then instead of the load paper, I changed it to say load puppies. And every now and then you'd hear random people being confused when they'd go to the printer. One person was actually looking for the coin slot to print off. And I bring that up because it's not just new technology that can be hacked. Hacking has a long history of being able to break into devices. So I'm going to start off, and I admit I'm going to scare you a little bit when we start talking, but I want you to keep in the back of your mind that I'm talking about some of the security issues, but I myself also have fully jumped into the connected home. I have all of my smartphones serve as sensors to let the thermostat and the lights know when somebody's at home or when everybody's left. So it's a good field, and it's one that I fully believe in, but there are some security issues that we need to be aware of. So thermostats, smart thermostats. I currently live in Texas, which is a little bit hotter than it is here. Before that, I lived in Japan, which if you've ever been to Japan in the summer, you know that it's miserable, or Tokyo at least. So heating and cooling has been a very big issue in my life for the past few years. So I usually keep it a little bit warmer than 72, but let's say that it's a nice hot day, and this, in fact, see the 110 degrees, it was actually 110 degrees at my house a couple months ago, or no, a couple weeks ago. But let's say you set your thermostat, and everything's nice, but then what happens if it gets hacked, right? So you've got the smart thermostat that gets hacked, and now it's changed the heating up to 99, right? So you're starting to sweat it a little bit. And you go to try and change it, and you get a little pop-up that says, pay $100, or your temperature will stay at 99, right? And another pops up, says, temperature will increase in 1 day, right? So this is the type of things that are within the realm of reason. In fact, I was at Black Hat and DEF CON, which are security conferences, a couple weeks ago, where someone demonstrated an actual hack on a smart thermostat. Now, to be fair, it wasn't a remote hack. You had to have access to the device itself, but they were able to load ransomware onto a smart thermostat. And in fact, there was a whole village. They call them villages at DEF CON. There's the social engineering village where you can go and pick up tips on how to social engineer. Or there was one of my favorites is the lock picking village where you can just sit around and learn how to pick locks. There was an IoT village this year. And I've been in for a couple years. And here's some of the topics that were on display. Exploiting a smart fridge. Picking Bluetooth LE locks from a quarter-mile away. Hacking popular drones. I was just talking to one gentleman earlier about his love of drones. Thermostat ransomware and workshop. There was actually a workshop on how to work on this. And the next one is my favorite title of the entire thing. Hot Wheels, hacking electronic wheelchairs. That one killed me. And it was interesting. They were actually able to put a small device based on a Raspberry Pi, connect it to an open port on the back of an electronic wheelchair, and remotely control it. And the guy that was doing it was in a wheelchair, and he said, look, somebody could very easily do this to me, and I wouldn't see them, right? Because it was around back where the motor was. And he actually let people use an Xbox controller and drive him around, which I don't know that I would have trusted people to do that, but he seemed like a good guy. So all of these things were going on, and what it shows is there's a focus, there's an interest in hacking these devices. So we're seeing a lot more issues around security, like every day. In fact, we track about 305 pieces of new malware every minute. So that's about 5 every second. Right? I actually had built this kind of countdown clock that showed you, in a representation of all the new threats that were coming along. And I had built this, I think I built this thing like maybe 8 years ago. And at that point, when I built it, I had to kind of do a little bit of math to figure out how many there were. And we were averaging about, I would say, 20 threats every minute 5 years ago. Right? And so now we're down to 5 every second. So it's a dramatic increase. There's been a huge increase in ransomware. Ransomware, I think, personally, is probably the biggest blight to the consumer because ransomware can hit you, and unless you have a backup of your PC, there's no way to get around it unless you pay the ransom. You know, they encrypt it with encryption that would take decades to crack with a fleet of supercomputers. So ransomware is a very effective way for cybercriminals to get in and get a hold of your system. Mobile malware is also on the rise. In the last year, we've seen a 137% increase in mobile malware. Right? Now, the majority of that has been on the Android operating system. Android makes up about 57% of the mobile market. So we're seeing a huge shift to malware on Android. And why do you think that is? Right? I think about my laptop. A lot of times I leave my laptop somewhere. I leave it at the, at the hotel when I go somewhere, or I leave it at my desk. But I always have my phone with me. Right? And everybody I know has their phone with them all the time. And think about what's on your phone. You've got contacts, you've got email, you have banking apps that probably log in directly. So this is why it's a good target for cyber criminals. And additionally, we're seeing more Mac OS malware. There's always been this kind of urban myth that Macs don't get viruses. And it's not that the Mac OS is any more secure. It's not. It's just that traditionally it's been a lower part of the market. Right? There have been a lower percentage of PCs were Macs. And so cyber criminals tend to focus on getting the best bang for their buck. So if 70% of your target is PC, you design malware for PCs. Right? Now, as Mac is becoming growing in popularity, we're seeing a rise of malware that has been increasing dramatically. And so that's 500%. That's not a typo. 500% increase in malware on the Macs in the past year. So who are these bad guys? Who are the bad guys that are causing all of this mischief? Right? We have, up at the top, I ranked them from, I think, the most dangerous to the least. At the top, we have nation states. We have countries doing active reconnaissance and intelligence gathering. We've all seen things in the news. I'm not going to go off and list all of the things that we've heard recently about hacks by countries. But these pieces of malware tend to be very advanced, very hard to get rid of, very hard to detect. Then next step down, we have organized crime. So organized crime, I believe, makes up the biggest chunk of what we're seeing from cybercrime. Organized crime has always been good at finding out where to make money illegally, and things like ransomware and extortion and stuff like that falls right into their wheelhouse. So organized crime surprisingly has a very large play in cybersecurity. Below that, we have hacktivists, right? And hacktivists are, as you can guess, it's a combination of the term activist and hacker. And these are people that will cause hacks or security breaches based on a political agenda. They will hack a politician's website. And it's not just politics either. It's also, if there's a company that they disagree with. I think a big example of that is the Ashley Madison hack that happened a couple years ago. That was somebody that didn't agree with their policy and their privacy policy, so they released this huge trove of all of the users. And that was done as an idealistic venture. And then at the bottom, it's what we call script kiddies. Right? And script kiddie is a term for somebody that doesn't actually know how to hack, couldn't necessarily create a piece of malware, but they know how to run a script. Right? And they want to figure out, they want to do hacks and they want to attack things. So script kiddies are basically, kids that have too much time on their hands and will cause trouble. So what are they after? right? We think about, it's easy to think about, okay, at the enterprise level, what do cyber criminals want? That's easy to figure out. They want intellectual property, they want to steal things, there's a good solid target. But what about people, right? Why are hackers interested in people? They want your patterns, right? They want to figure out what you do. They want to figure out how you behave. And the reason behind this is because if you go online in the black markets online, personal data is worth about 10 to 20 times more than a credit card number. Right? If somebody steals a credit card number, it's probably good for a couple days or something like that. But if someone steals your login information, your passwords, your information around where you live, how old you are, your social security number, that data can be reused many times over to create new identities and open up credit card accounts, et cetera. So last time I checked, a stolen credit card goes for about $1 online. A profile, depending on how much is built out, goes for about $10 to $20 per individual person. So when the bad guys are coming around, what they're looking for is they're looking for those patterns. They want to build a profile of you. So let's go back to this our hacked thermostat. Right? And again, like I said, the example that was shown a couple weeks ago did require direct access to the device. So you didn't necessarily you couldn't remotely hack it, but it served as a proof of concept as to what you could do. And I was talking about this in the office, and one of my coworkers said, okay, well, what would really happen, right? If somebody hacked my thermostat, are they going to bring down my entire network? Well, no, they'll make you sweat a little bit. But really, when you think about it, that thermostat doesn't exist on its own, right? It's not sitting out there by itself. It has to connect to something, right? It has to connect to a wireless access point. That wireless access point, however, what connects to that? Your phone, your laptop, smart TV, smart door locks, lights, smart refrigerator, and even toys, right? We're seeing more smart toys that connect to the internet. So from a hacking perspective, the reason I would hack that thermostat is because it would give me access to that Wi-Fi, right? And from there, I can launch an attack against the Wi-Fi access point and gain a foothold in the network, right? I always tell people, don't do banking on a internet connection that you don't trust. Don't do it at the coffee shop. Don't do it from your hotel. You should do that sort of thing on your home network because you can trust that network. But if you've got other devices that are connecting to somewhere outside on the internet that you can't control, they could potentially hack into that wireless access point, and that's where that becomes an issue. And think about smartwatches, right? This is actually a way of extending that concept of the connected life outside of your door, right? And you typically think about a smartwatch as one device, right? You think about it as the thing that's around your wrist. But if you look at it, it's actually part of a bigger infrastructure, right? The smart device or the wearable connects to a mobile device, right? That mobile device connects to a cloud server, right? Because your PC or your phone's not going to do all the processing and track all of your data by itself. It's going to have a back-end server. It's going to have that back-end server so that if you log in from a different phone or if you log in on your iPad or something else, you can still keep that data relevant. And of course, it's going to send back and go back to the device. So from a hacking perspective, you have all of these points where someone could go in and actually run a hack. So you think about the one small device that you're wearing is actually part of a much larger infrastructure of things that can be attacked. Is anybody a little freaked out yet? Maybe? Okay. In fact, actually, one of the tools that was demonstrated at DEF CON was a tool set for hacking Bluetooth, right? For specifically hacking the Bluetooth LE protocol. And what that would do is it would actually go through listen to the Bluetooth communication for like a smart lock or a fitness tracker, would collect that information and be able to replay it and figure out, and send those commands to the device. So there's actually, and the reason I put this up here is to show you that there are not only people doing experimentation with security around these connected devices, they're putting them together in packages so that you can test your own security. Now, unfortunately, not everybody that uses this is going to use it to test their own security. Some people will use this to break into things. So it's one thing that you need to be aware of. And another thing is when we start thinking about smart vehicles. I'm sure everyone heard about the Jeep hack. There was one that happened last year, and then there was a part 2 that took place. As we're getting further along, we're seeing that more people are buying into the concept of the automated car, right? The autonomous vehicle that drives you around. A recent study by Road and Track magazine said that 1 in 4 people would nap in a self-driving car. I was actually talking about this with my wife, and my oldest daughter overheard it. She said, "Yeah, I would totally do that." She's like, my youngest, like, "I'd play video games while the car was driving." So while it may seem weird to us, the people that are going to be driving in a few years, it's not going to be a weird thing, right? So the security around this has to be in place. And the problem with cars is that there's a lot of sensors, right? There are a lot of entry points for a hacker to get into. So as we start going about and figuring out what to do with these devices, we have to keep in mind of how connected do we really need to be. Personally, I don't like the idea of my car itself being able to connect to the wild world around. But there are conveniences that it offers, right? And in fact, as driverless cars come about, there's going to need to be a constant connection. So security needs to improve, and luckily, based on conversations I've had with automotive manufacturers and people within our company, it's a big concern for the automotive industry, and it's one that they're actively working on fixing. So hopefully, what doesn't happen in a few years, as we start getting more connectivity and better smart cars, we don't want to see this, right? We don't want to see ransomware on our car. This would say, "Sure, you want directions to the restaurant you're going to? Pay me $50 and I'll unlock your GPS." Right? So it's something that we have to really be thinking about. So where do we start? As we start thinking about all of these security issues that I've been talking about, what can we do? And I don't mean we as Intel. I mean we as in people. Right? How do we stay safe in this age of connected devices? So a recent study by Verizon showed that 63% of data breaches involved a weak password. Right? So, and by weak password, actually we'll come back to that in a second. I'll show you some of the examples. But this shows the importance of a good password. And unfortunately, a lot of connected devices ship with either weak default passwords that are very easy to search online and find. In fact, I shouldn't admit this, but I'd say maybe 10 years ago, I just moved into this apartment, and we hadn't got our they dropped off the wireless access point for our cable, and it was configured strangely, and I couldn't figure out what was the actual password. So I ended up going into my neighbor's Wi-Fi because I saw it there, and then used the default password to get into their connection, and use that to research and fix my own. Right? So. And that was because I could do that because they had a weak password. So there's a website, it's called Shodan, right? And what Shodan does is it goes out and indexes connected devices. And there's, in fact, one view that you can look at. As you can see up in the top left, I just typed in cam, right, and did a search. And it showed up a quick, and this was one page of, I think, about 534 pages of connected webcams that had no username or password. And I had to go a couple pages in to get a page that had no people in them. Because the first couple of pages there was a nursery with a bunch of kids. There was a couple businesses. There was some office where they were doing, I don't know what they were doing in that office. It looked a little shady. But these are cams that are available, that are connected, and they have no password. So the first thing that you want to do is you get in a new device, figure out if you can change the password. Change it to a good password, a strong password. And I actually tell people, if you get a device that's connected to the internet and you cannot change the password, take it back and get a competitor, right? Because if you can't change the password, they don't care about your security. And you need to deal with somebody that cares about your security. So there's a list of the top 10 worst passwords. Can somebody guess what the top one? Close. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 actually beat out password. And you see a number, of different variations of 1 through 8, 1 through 9. I don't know how football and baseball, that just seems like a random kind of password to use. You see QWERTY, of course. And I was looking through the list, and all the way down at 25, Star Wars. I was very happy to see that showed up. Honestly, I think this is because the new movie just came out, and so people were, it was on their brain. But yeah, this list, there's a company that releases this list every year, and for the past few years, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and password have been at the top. So think about a password. So the first thing you do is you want to make your password great. Right? Not a good password, a great password. So the way you do that, it needs 8 or more characters, and I know it's a pain because on average, the average person has to deal with 27 different logins online, and it's very difficult to keep them all separate. But try to make a long password of 8 or more characters. Mix in lower, uppercase, numbers and symbols, and also use a different password for each account. Right? And the reason why is because if an account that you have online gets hacked, gets breached, and it will happen. I don't know anybody that hasn't had an account somewhere that hasn't shown up in a breach. You've probably gotten an email saying, our forum account was hacked or whatever. What will happen is when those breaches happen, the cybercriminals will take the big list of username and password, and they'll put them into what's called a rainbow table or a password list. And those passwords are used to try and break in or log into whatever account they can think of. Right? So if they find, maybe they were able to hack some 3D printing forum, they get all those passwords and usernames, and then they'll try all those passwords and usernames on Gmail and Amazon and Time Warner, all of those, to try and find a match. So if your password is in one of those accounts and it's compromised, so what? Right? You have to change that one, but it's not going to impact the other accounts you have because you're smart and you've used a different password for each one. Now this gets overwhelming because as I mentioned earlier, you have 27, is that right, Mary? 27? Yes, thank you. 27 different accounts you have to keep track of. So I actually recommend using a password management tool. There are a number of them that are available. Typically they have ones that will sync up across your PC, your Mac, in your web browser. In fact, I believe there's one included in the free card that we're handing out. Use a password management tool. I have no idea what any of my passwords are anymore. I have my one master password that I use for my password management tool, and then everything else is just done automatically. Right? And that way, if one of those accounts get hacked, I don't care. I'll just generate a new random password, and it's not going to be used to get into any of my others. So I strongly recommend that you use a different password for each account. Even if you would kind of ignore and flake a little bit on the first two, at least use a different password. So maybe 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 for one account and then password for another. But just try and use something different. Phishing. Are people familiar with phishing? So phishing, for those of you that aren't, phishing is a way to trick you into clicking on a malicious link. Right? You'll get an email saying your Gmail password has been compromised. You need to click this link to reset it. And it'll take you to a page that looks like it's a real page, but it's not. Right? It's the bad guys trying to go through and trick you into either revealing a lot of sensitive information, or the link will simply have malware on it, right? And you click the link and you get infected with malware. So Verizon recently did a test, and they found that 30% of phishing emails are opened, right? So 30% of the emails that the bad guys sent out are opened, which is, to be honest, is a good return, right? They send out hundreds of thousands of emails. So if they get 30,000 people clicking, that's good. That's time well spent. 13% of those people that open those emails click through, right? Actually click on the link. Again, if you're dealing in tens and hundreds of thousands, that's still a pretty good chunk of people that you've tricked into clicking on this link. 225 seconds. That's at about 4 minutes. That's the average time that it took from launching a phishing campaign to the first person clicking through. So this works really well for bad guys, and that's why they keep doing it. So my number one rule for phishing is be a skeptic, be suspicious. I always tell this story, and it's because I sent a link to a photo album online from a trip to my mother-in-law. And I basically just used the email, a link button. I didn't write an email to her, I just sent it automatically. And about 20 minutes later, she called me. She goes, "Did you send me a link?" I'm like, "Yes, I did, thank you," right? And that's what you gotta do. She saw this link, she wasn't expecting an email from me. It was, you know how the automated links are often crazy long with a lot of different characters, right? So to her, she was like, "This looks weird. I wasn't expecting this." So she was a skeptic, right? So my rules for this are never click on a link or attachment from someone you don't know, right? They will do many things to trick you into clicking these links. But if you get an email from somebody you don't know, don't click on it. Odds are it is not going to be a good thing. Verify links and attachment from people you do know, right? One really good way for cybercriminals to spread malware is to compromise someone's Facebook account, and you guys have probably seen this, and then start posting links on their Facebook wall. All right, so if you have a friend that starts posting a lot of weird stuff, they've probably had their account compromised. And a lot of times they say, my account's been hacked. It hasn't been hacked. Somebody guessed their password, or somebody found their password because they used a simple password. Maybe it was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Right? Maybe it was password. So even from people you do know, make sure that they intended to send that. I actually had a friend of mine, and I will never admit his name because he will be super embarrassed about this because he works in security, but his Facebook account was compromised, and I got a little message icon or a message popped up from him in the corner, and it was really weird because he never messages me on Facebook. And sure enough, I followed the link I opened up a virtual machine because it looked suspicious and followed the link to see where it went, and it was a malicious link. So they're going to try to trick you into clicking on links, and the best way to do that is to infect a friend of yours and then send a link from there. And if you ever get an email saying that your account has been compromised and you need to reset your password, go to the site directly. Don't click on a link. Let's say you get a link that says your PayPal account needs to be updated. Don't click on the link they have. Just go to paypal.com. And if there's something wrong with your account and you try to log in, they will tell you, right? So always, when you get a link to try, asking you to reset a password, if you didn't ask for that reset, just go straight to the source itself. That'll save you a lot of trouble. So this one in the past year, 85% of successful exploits, these are successful things when people were able to break into a system, were one of the top 10 vulnerabilities. And by that I mean the top 10 known vulnerabilities. That means everybody knows about them. All the security vendors, all the software vendors all know about these vulnerabilities. And there should be a fix available for them, right? There should be a patch, there should be an update, but still in the last year, 85% of the exploits came from one of those well-known things that already had a patch. So my tips for that, always update your operating system and your apps when there's a new update available. Turn on auto update. I have, all of my apps automatically update. My operating system, typically with, Android or iOS, you have to go in and agree to an update. But when you see that little icon telling you that there's a new update on your mobile device, you should update. A lot of times they do fix bugs or problems that are arising, but most of the time when these patches come out, it's to fix a security issue. In fact, there was one recently that was, I think, 2 Apple updates ago that fixed a vulnerability that would allow someone to actually compromise your iOS device, your iPhone, by just sending you a malformed link through an SMS. Right? They could send you a link, and it would be able to compromise your iOS. So there was an update very quickly for that. Turn on auto updates, as I mentioned, and use security software. If you have a PC or a Mac or Android or iOS, utilize security software. It is relatively inexpensive based on the amount of trouble that you will get into and spend the time you'll spend repairing your system if you have a virus. And these days, there's the old theory, everybody always blames the security software for being slowing down their computer. When I was in tech support, I would have people tell me, oh, your software's making my computer run slow. And then I would look and they would have 20 windows of Internet Explorer open. Like, no, that's what's slowing down your computer. But nowadays, the PCs and devices are so quick that the security software has very little impact to the performance. So use security software because that's going to really help you. And awareness, this is the #1 thing. Be aware of what's going on. Think about all of the security advice that I've given you here. Think about what sort of data you're providing. When you're signing up for a new account, maybe you get a new smartphone or a new connected device, and you're supposed to create a new account for that. Think really hard about the amount of information you're providing. Think about if if they need to have your actual address, or if you can just have a email address. Being smart and thinking about security is something that I think will help you so much in the end. And it's something that's only going to increase as time goes on. We think now about, you have the check engine light that comes on when there's trouble with your car. Well, if we start looking at more automated cars and more smart cars and that sort of thing, there may be a check security light in the next few years, right? So being aware that these devices that you're bringing in can greatly improve your enjoyment of life, the amount of fun you can have. They can help save money if you're dealing with a smart thermostat. But you also have to keep in mind that they are computing devices that can be hacked. So keep that in mind, be smart about security, and you'll be safer. If you have any questions, feel free. The easiest way to get a hold of me is on Twitter. I'm at Bruce Snell at Twitter. And thank you for your time.